Hey everybody, welcome to Oregon State University Pro. This is the 2020 first course. So this is the winter and spring. This is office hours 1. Thanks so much for joining us if you're here live or if you're watching after the fact. As we get into office hours, we'll go through the agenda. We'll talk a little bit about the process, the flow. We'll talk about the questions that have been posted. And if anybody has questions now, you can go to the questions document. In a second, I'll post it in the chat and then you can put it on there. I just ask that everybody mute yourselves unless you need to unmute. That way we can just focus on what we're doing. And so great to see everybody. If you haven't read my introduction yet, my name is Javan Bernakevitch. I own and operate All Points Design. It's a land and life design company that since 2009, I've been helping folks from backyards, currently working on a 6,500 acre site to become more diverse, abundant, and if necessary, profitable. On the life design side, it's kind of a fun business. I've been helping folks with values-based decision-making, which is a curated process that comes out of Alan Savory's work and Dan Palmer's work, basically creating our goals into values instead of goals, and then using this process to vet different decisions and goals for their ability to create our values. This was phenomenal and an amazing innovation on Alan Savory's work and has been essential to my work, working with clients and also my own work. And then on the land design side, doing everything from water systems to full design process, working in small and large scale, working with corporations as well as individuals, just having a really good time since 2009. Recently, last year, I created an educational learning platform called Regenerative Living. Basically, I saw everything that was happening internationally and locally, people becoming recalcitrant and polarized. And as much as I love the tool of permaculture, folks can deify it and turn it into a big capital P permaculture as if it's the truth ordained by some greater force. And I just decided I wanted to have something that was, call it non-denominational. And so regenerativliving.online is a platform for practical skills as if we want to stay on the planet, and been developing and offering courses with a host of folks, which we'll talk about later if we've got some time. And what else can I tell you about myself? I live on 400 acres in the interior of British Columbia with my partner, with a number of animals, and we're new here within the last year and a half. So just building soil, just doing all the work that I normally do for other people, but finally am no longer an itinerant traveling land designer, finally landed. So it's really nice to see a season through because I haven't had that for a number of years. So with that, we'll jump into the work here. I'm going to repost the question link. It is in the course conversation, but I know there's a lot of people who were having problems trying to find this. So what I'd like to do is just first share my screen and show you where it is in Canvas so you can see it. So if you give me 2 secs, we'll do a screen share here. There we go. Thumbs up if you can see the screen. Fantastic. So this is our group discussion. And so what you'll find is we've got pinned discussions, and I pin those as they come up. And so the very first one is OSU PDC PRO 2022 Winter Spring Office Hours Group. It's published, so we click on that. And then we've got this introduction. So I'll be hosting the Q&A sessions. Priority will be given to those questions that are submitted before the call. There's additional time that comes up during Q&A. We'll answer those questions. Sessions will be recorded and publicly available on the YouTube channel and after the call. So when I say please plan accordingly, if you do not want to be visible on this call for whatever reason, we've had folks that aren't just comfortable for that. That's totally fine. Make sure to change your name on Zoom. Make sure to not put your image up. If you are comfortable with it, it's great for me. It's great to see all your faces and not speak into the void. We've got a question document here, which I'll pull up in a second. Our timing is Mondays at 10 a.m. Pacific time to 11 a.m. Pacific time. I'll stay online for 15 minutes after 10 a.m. If no one shows up, I'm going to head out. But if you show up, I'll stay as long as we've got questions for the hour. And then these are our dates. So we've got a break in between, so take note of that. Here's the login description as well as the passcode. And then there's our Zoom etiquette. This is a great read. It just gives you a sense of good ways to be on Zoom from a colleague of mine. These will be where I will post our previous hours, and I decided to include our hours from the previous course, which is actually running concurrent to yours because the pros overlap. Because we've moved from a 10-week to a 20-week, the second half of the first pro course is overlapping your first half. So I included some of theirs because it's great information. And then every once in a while, and this is available to you folks, if you're really struggling, if you need some help, reach out to me. We'll have a quick one-on-one. Sometimes they're 20 minutes, sometimes they're 60 minutes. Everybody has a different learning curve when it comes to online learning, and we have a lot of different moving pieces in this course. So let me be the first to tell you, if you're having troubles, please reach out. It's not you. It's nothing to do with anything besides the fact that there's a lot to learn, especially if you're brand new to this. And I'm happy to walk you through it. I've walked through folks many times, and I'm happy to do it. So if we click on this link, this will take us to our questions. And basically what this is a way of bringing our questions to the conversation. So we've got, I have this really fun glitch in my Chrome, which randomly sends me to different sites, nothing to do with my search history. It just does. And I've totally removed Chrome, removed my cache, done it again. You'll see this in my feedback. If I ever figure it out, you won't have to deal with it, but there was an example of it. So here's a great example. So this was from last semester. So Richard put in his name, where he's from, and then a link to his site. You don't have your portfolios put together yet, so you won't have that just yet. But when you do, this will be a link. And he basically said, unfortunately, I won't be able to join, but I would like this answered. There was a Huga culture question. And so we went through that question. So when you're down here, just make sure to put in your name, where you're from, if you have the link, and then your question, and then I will answer below. I tend to answer them before the call. Gives me some time to have some precognition time with it, and then we can go through it. So I'm just gonna copy that, and I'm gonna put it into our chat bar, so that way if anybody has an extra question and they wanna type it out, go for it. And if you wanna just ask the question live after I get through what I have, then we'll do that. Oh, we got a few more folks. Hey, Zach. Hey, Suzanne. Hey, Maxwell. And hey, D-Bob K. Wonderful name. Love it. Cool. So we're going to jump into it right away here. So I'm just going to call up this question on a different browser so it doesn't do that weird jump thing. So I did the welcome and hello. So we talked about the questions and processes. Remember, this is a live document, so if you type in this, you will change things. So we've got our first question. I'm having trouble locating list of climate communities and climate type. I could find the Copenhagen climate for the site, but not list of the other two to determine what my site is. Western North Carolina, USA. Thanks, Suzanne. Excuse me. So a couple of major or meta points about searching for climate and climate type. So data on the internet is not made equal for different countries. And I've had students from Romania, the island of Cyprus, all across Africa, all across Asia, all across Northern Europe. And some places are information rich and some places are information poor or deficit. When we get to the States and we get to Canada, we tend to have quite a bit of data. So it was a pretty quick pass, and there's a couple of ways to go about this. There's an amazing KML. So if you've gone through the tutorials, you'll know that I am personally a fan of Google Earth Pro, the desktop edition. This is not the one that's online, it's the desktop edition. And I can walk through how to find that. There is a tutorial on it. But if anybody's interested, I may be getting the hiccups. This will be fun for no one if that happens. But when you have that Copenhagen classification, you can also tell if it's in the tropics, subtropics, arid tropics, arid, or temperate or polar temperate. So we can look at that, but basically when I'm looking at a new place, I'll do Copenhagen first. And what I'll do is I'll go onto Google Earth Pro and I will pull up the Copenhagen layer. And again, if anybody wants that, just send me an email or let me know and I might put it publicly. But it has the entire world on it, and it has forecasts for how the climate will change. And it's updated almost every year or 2 years. If you're interested in that type of work, OSU does a great advanced climate resiliency course that goes through your site and then projects into the future. A lot of designers have said there will be a mark forever in their mind about before and after that course, because it really does change the way you look at these sites. Bill Mollison, one of the two founders of permaculture, had this wonderful saying that permaculturalists are time scouts. And it's absolutely the case. We're always looking into the future. We're always looking at models and predictability. And we just started an amazing course with Jude Hobbs about designing edible hedgerows on Saturday through regenerative living. And there's a question about how should we design for climate? And what we're seeing with the climatologists that I work with and another gentleman in that course are working with is that there's more energy in the atmosphere due to primarily water. This is something that Walter Jenning, Jehne, has popularized and is really not spoken about, definitely not in the mainstream media. And even in subsections of science is not being spoken about. But basically, when you take water or you drain watersheds, when you move that water into atmosphere through the destruction of wetlands or through the heat island effect on the coast, so basically as weather comes in from the ocean, it hits those well-populated, well-developed areas that are no longer mangroves, which are no longer estuaries, which are no longer oceanic vegetation. And basically, instead of that rain falling, it hits that heat and it basically goes up and it turns into high pressure systems. And when it comes inland, finally, because it has to, we get what's called cloud bursts. And so basically we get like a month of rain, 2 months of rain in a short period of time. And when you get into the climate survey, as well as the challenges and site and regional challenges assignment, you'll be looking into that data to see if it exists for your site. Again, sometimes that data doesn't exist. And if that ever happens in your site, just say, note, looked for it, couldn't find it. I'm still looking, which is great. So basically, when we have this weather conversation, when we have more energy in the atmosphere, because water can hold a lot of energy, we tend to have a variable climate where generally the mean is trending upwards, but the highs and lows are much higher and much lower. This is true for temperature, drought, as well as wet and rain events. So the wets are wetter, the dries are drier, the hots are hotter, the cools are colder. Generally, that's what we're seeing in trending. Every place is a little different when you start taking a look at macro and microclimates that have to do with jet streams and polar vortexes and other sort of major meteorological phenomena. But generally, that's what we're seeing. So Copenhagen is a great place to look. And so for Suzanne, basically what I did is I went online, typed in Western North Carolina ecology, looked up flora and fauna, looked up biology, came up with a bunch of different links. And generally it looks like, depending on where you are in Western North Carolina, you're either in the temperate, human subtropic, or subtropic highlands. So what I'd recommend is going through the links, taking a look at the maps that are listed in the links. The one that I really enjoyed was the NC Forestry. And generally, when we take a look into private enterprise, they tend to have more information than less. In Canada, we have an incredible biological community, and they have basically decoded almost every square inch of Canada into some kind of sub-region. In British Columbia, we have it down to ecoregions. Ontario is the same, and a number of other provinces have those smaller little subsets. In terms of climax community, again, it really depends. It looks like there's a lot of blue mountain forest and mixed mesophilic forests. So again, you'll have to find your specific site on some of these maps, Suzanne, and just drill down. If after another exhaustive search, you're totally out and you've called these biologists and conservation groups and they can't help you, reach back out. I'm happy to give you another hand, but that was all within a couple of minutes. So it takes knowing where to look, and it's no commentary on your research skills at all. Does that answer your question, Suzanne? Feel free to unmute. Go ahead.
Kind of, because I found that it was CF. Oh, where's my thing? I found the, is it
Copenhagen?
Copenhagen.
Yeah.
Okay. But my problem is I don't know enough about the other lists to find. So when it says it could be this or this, I mean, I know the site, if I could find a description of what those definitions are, that's kind of what I was looking for.
Yeah. And what was the Copenhagen?
It is CFA, humid subtropical.
Yeah, humid subtropical. There you go. So that's your
So
climate.
those are the same then?
Yeah. So basically, Copenhagen's letters stand for 3 different elements, and then they're always going to have that last piece that tells you what the general climate is. So that way, if you're talking to somebody, you're not speaking in the code that is Copenhagen. So it's that subtropic conversation there. So that's your climate type.
Okay, and then the climax, the problem I was having, all the research I found was just defining what it is, but I couldn't find like a list of what are different kinds.
Right. So as I was looking through those links, it looks like there's a number of different climax forests in your area, and you'll just have to match it on a map. And then once you have that climate type, or pardon me, the climax ecology type, then you can look into the plant lists that have been generated if they have. They may not. Okay,
that makes more sense, because I know, it's a mixture of hardwood and softwood timber.
Yeah.
That's it. And
Beautiful forest. I love teaching this course because I get to look at forests that just, I have forest envy. I have a lot of ponderosa pine and Engelmann spruce, but some of those hardwoods are just incredible when you get into the more humid climates. So thanks for your question. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Diane, Bobka, I have some questions about the following statement. With the course assignment. Okay, so I'm just going to share the screen again and make sure I'm in Safari. Just give me one sec. Safari, and go to the questions. There we are. Okay. So questions about the following statement from the course assignment. If you do not wish to disclose your exact location, please contact your group leader. Who's the group leader? If I don't send the location just to the group leader, who will have access to it? Will all our assignments be publicly available? Thanks. So all assignments can be accessed by other students because you're posting it on the site. If you don't want to disclose this in your assignment, you can just send me an email with your location, just saying, hey, this is where I'm at. And what I do like, however, is if you can give me generally the closest city and the state or province or county or region. And that just allows me to know roughly where you are. And so I can provide a higher level of feedback. If you're not comfortable with that level of disclosure, then it just means that my feedback will be a little bit more general. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, great. Awesome. Any other questions from the group as it stands right now? Anything that came up from that, or anything that folks were thinking that they didn't get a chance to put down on the question list?
If we've got a question between now and when the assignment's due, can we just email you directly? Is that the best way?
Yeah, you can email me directly. So you can either do that through Canvas, or you can do that through my email, which I will put up onto that office hours list. And I've got an introductory email I'll be sending out today that's got a bunch of tips and tricks and other things. So you can just send me that. In the assignments, the last assignment, I'll actually share this just to show everybody. The last slide on every single one of the templates is a Q&A. So down here. So this is a great way if you finished an assignment and you have a question about the assignment, or you have a question about a design element, this is a great place to put it. You basically just put a question down, ask me a question. And the way that I give feedback is I do video feedback. So I will do a video, and that allows me to give a lot more feedback than if I was just writing. If you do want text feedback, just let me know. I can switch to that. It just means you usually get less feedback because we have a set amount of time we give feedback and all the rest of it. So this is a great way to give questions for specific assignments. If you have questions about an assignment, you can email me directly. And if you have questions pertaining to an office hour, you can put it onto the office hour question doc here. Does that answer your question? Corey, there we go. That's your name.
Yeah, good.
I had to go and find your name there. Awesome. Cool. Any other questions? Cool. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the first assignments. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what to look for, what to be careful about, because it's all different for everybody. Before I do though, I want to have a couple of caveats. One, this is a design course. This is not a rendering course. This is about understanding where elements should go and how they interact with each other and how they interact with people and how they interact with sectors, which are influences on the site. This is not a how to make beautiful imagery course. It's not advertised as one. It isn't one. A lot of people get wrapped up with the pretty picture. And I want to give you all permission right now to not worry about making a pretty picture. We're just looking for clear, legible maps. That's it. So if it's pen and paper, if it's crayon, that's great. The template is there for those that would like to take their skills to the next level and would like to work in an application like Google Slides. Google Slides is not a design software, but it's accessible, it's free, and we've created tutorials for it because it's accessible and free. Folks, as you're looking at the examples, you'll see that some people have done beautiful work in Adobe Illustrator and Adobe Photoshop. They've used GIMP, they've used Inkscape, they've used Vectorworks. That's after this process. So after you've got the design in your mind, then great, go specialize in a design software if you want to go that way. Go take a drawing class. But what we have here is the general basis so that way you can communicate your ideas clearly and easily and make sure that everything's there. So if you did want to print off this portfolio that you'll finish, you can. You could print it off and you have something to show for your first design. Something else I'll say is that after a design course, and this is direct from Bill Mollison, the only thing we can say is that you've taken a design course. We don't know how good you are. You've only had one design under your belt. So something that comes with the territory of a PDC is people think, I'll take one course and I'll be a designer and I can go off and do the work. It took me roughly between 3 and 5 years to feel confident to do this work full time. And there was a process there. There was a lot of family and friends who were like, sure, why don't you come over and give me a design? Or, hey, sure, I'll pay for the materials if you do the design for free. Or, yeah, I'll pay you, to which I then paid a mentor of mine. I directly just channeled the money through me to my mentor and said, great, help me design this and this money is for you so that way I can learn. In terms of mentorship in this space, there's nothing formal. You have to show up to different mentors with value to work with them. And I was highly successful doing it that way. I basically showed up to half a dozen mentors over the first few years of my work. I got work in the ground. I took a lot of before and after pictures, and that built the capacity to demonstrate that I knew what I was talking about. So I really want to set the expectation here that after your first design course, chances are you will have gone through the design course, but the level of acumen that you've built is variable on the amount of time you've put in and can only really say that you've done one design. Like anything, you need a lot of mileage. So what I can say is that after a design course, I'd highly recommend doing multiple designs for multiple individuals on multiple scales, knowing that you'll have to scale up to farm design. Everyone thinks they come out of a PDC and they know better than a farmer. Please don't be that person. Please don't go to a farmer after a PDC and say, I know more than you. They've been doing it for 10, 15, 20, 40 years. We can offer potentially observations and conversations, but it's really a disservice to walk into another person's profession and tell them what they ought to know. So with that caveat out, because it's an important one that people can fall into, I want to jump into the first assignment. So the first assignment is the personal survey, and it's a great way for me and the rest of the student body to get a sense of who you are. You put in a photo, your name, your age, current occupation, background, a couple of photos about you. I'm just going to move this, which means me moving this for everybody, but just for the moment. How did you hear about permaculture? What's your background? Do you have any relevant experience? How do you want to integrate permaculture into your life? So basically just delete the ones that don't apply. What are your goals for the course? What does success look like for you? What's your interaction? And what are your expectations for the course? One of the things you'll notice is that if you say you want to have mastery of this, I will challenge you on that. So if you go through an assignment and there's a partial optional assignment and you don't do it, I'll be like, okay, just be aware if you're not doing those assignments, you're not aiming at mastery, because we're trying to give you the most amount of mastery you can throughout this course and assignment. The other way to have mastery in this work is to ask lots of questions and to interact with your fellow students and to provide feedback on my feedback. You'll find that the students do really well are the ones that once they get my feedback, they're like, oh, that was great. Thanks so much for this. I'm going to look at that. It's starting to create interactivity in an online course, which is hard. So as we get into the design site, basically what I want to know is, in the big picture, where are you? What's going on for your site? We start with an Indigenous land acknowledgement because we want to understand what the Indigenous conversation is there. Outside of North America, there's lots of places where the individuals who are designing are Indigenous to that land. So this is just a bigger awareness and bigger understanding to say, yeah, there is indigeneity. There's individuals who have been on this land for millennia, who know quite a bit about this land. And we're going to acknowledge that, and we're going to reach out to them and honor the work that they've done. A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to create a documentary called Facing Fire, Building Resiliency to Wildfire. If you search that on YouTube and my name, it'll pop right up. 22 minutes long, introductory conversation about wildfire. And sure, wouldn't you know it, that the individuals, the Indigenous population that had lived in North America for millennia worked with fire. They had anthropological fire, low intensity fire, to the point to where I had the opportunity to go down to Northern California to work with the UROC and the Cultural Fire Management Council and learn how to burn. It's a very cool thing to put fire on a landscape, but it takes a lot of assessment and a lot of skill and a lot of supervision and mentorship. As we get into the design site, we want macro to micro. You'll see some great examples of folks putting the entire planet on and then coming down to a country and coming down to a region and then a state, province, or county, and then a site of, or pardon me, a picture of this about how close you are to other areas, and then starting to label those areas. This is a design site of surrounding areas. So if we take a look over here, gives us a sense of where you are, gives us a sense of where you are. We're just trying to make sure that you're clear about where your site is and we can be clear. This is an aerial photograph. Generally, I like them to be a top-down bird's eye view, not a perspective view. So much more like this, because we're going to be designing like that. We won't be designing at perspective. So I highly recommend taking that perspective view and then giving us a dotted line of the property boundary. Here we've recommended using a dotted red line, but you can use whatever you like. Just make sure to put it in the legend. And that's a good point. Anything you put on a map, you need to put in a legend. So if you put a dot, a line, doesn't matter, has to be in the legend so we can reference it. We need to be able to see it and work with it. Finally, this is one of my favorite pieces. Give us a panoramic of the site if you can, and a bunch of different photos that show us what your site and where your site is. This is a great opportunity to show us more about the site, and especially this one. This shows us view corridors. This is great. This allows me to put myself in your site and say, great, image 1 is this view corridor. Image 2 is this view corridor. That's a really important piece for us to start to understand where your site is, and for you to start to get into a habit of taking multiple photos of a site through multiple seasons on multiple visits. So when I design a site, I tell folks, I'm going to be there a minimum of 3 times, if not 5 or 6 times. I'm going to come on minimum of 2 to 3 seasons, summer and winter. I'm a different type of designer. I like seeing a site, especially large scale sites in winter and in spring, and especially during what's called freshet in the temperate climate, which is when all that snow melts. If you're working in the tropics, you'll want to see it during monsoon or your rainy season, because the best time to watch water is when it's raining. You want to go and see it when you're having a deluge and walk around, put on your rubber boots, put on your jacket, and take a look at where the water's flowing. Yes, we do a lot of contour mapping and GIS hydrological flow diagrams, but the best way to take a look at water is walking the land with your 2 eyes. So highly recommend that. Oh, a little point, if you want to change your compass rose, please do, just make sure it's legible. And now we get to the SWOT analysis. So SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And basically what we're doing is we're getting a sense of what's happening on your site. What do you see through the lens of just the design set, just through a visual representation? What are some of the strengths? What are some of the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats? You'll hear me talk about this in the tutorials that I really enjoy bolded highlighting. And bolded highlighting is a way of, instead of highlighting with yellow, you highlight with bolding the text. And that's a great way to communicate the high notes, the high bits of your design to a reader, especially a client. And so we're practicing this with me and and the rest of your classmates. Once you get a sense of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, the assignment conclusion is really your sense as a designer, what then this information informs you to do next as a designer. As you get this information in, what's next for you? Okay, well, now that I see the site from these different imagery, it looks like there's a big open space here. I'm going to look further into that. Looks like this tree is dead and dying. I don't know much about this tree. I haven't even identified it. So next step for me will be to identify it and then potentially take a look at the wounds or the disease symptoms so I can start to identify that. This is really you telling me with this information, what's your next step? I don't need a full summary of what's going on necessarily. It's already here. Really want to know what you're going to do next with this. Lastly, ever need to make another slide, do so. If there's too much information, please do so. And the last thing, I've had a few students recently that have done this. This area is what ends up getting printed or turned into a PDF. So stay on the slide. Everything you put off of this, if you go into a presentation view, you can't see. And if you print it out, you can't see. So don't use this as working space. Use this as note-taking space or conversations about this. You can put in little text boxes to remind yourself about things, totally fine. Just make sure that this is the presentation page. And again, if you want to work in pen and paper, please do. Any questions about the first two assignments? Feel free to unmute yourself or put it into the chat. Generally pretty straightforward. Any questions there?
I have a question regarding the Indigenous acknowledgements. First of all, I think it's great that there's such an emphasis put on it. The site I will be designing is in Hungary, Europe. And given the European history, it's not quite analogous to many other countries. So there isn't really, I mean, there obviously were Indigenous people pre-Catholic times, but there's not a presence of them anymore. So how do I best deal with this in the presentation? Do I acknowledge this? Do I leave the slide out altogether? What's the best way for me to go about this?
Great question, Chris. So once we get into Europe and parts of Asia, basically what we're trying to do is honor ancestry. We're trying to honor the individuals that were there and potentially get a glimpse into what they were using for homes or for agriculture or for grazing or for nomadic travel. So if there's information about the individuals who were there pre-colonization, whatever that looks like for you, great. If you can't find that information, fine. I was working on a site in very close to Hungary, and it was amazing because the people who were there could trace their lineage back 20, 25 generations. It was remarkable. And they just spoke about their ancestors. They spoke about what they were looking at there. They spoke about some of the history and the archaeology that's been found and some of the assumptions and the hypotheses that were created about how they lived there. So I would do something like that just to acknowledge that there were folks that were there before we moved into an industrialized revolution, even before we moved into an agricultural revolution. And we're just trying to get a sense of that connection, that history thread of connection, because there's just so much richness when we get into these sites. We really want to know what was happening. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's a good point, and there's plenty to talk about that. And it's good that I can just like take the historic acknowledgement, but go with that, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if there's any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat or just unmute and interrupt me. Climate survey. So we're looking at the location where you are in the world. What is the climate type, which we can get off the Copenhagen, or we can just search it. The USDA hardiness zone, the Canadian zone, or if you're other places in the world, you can use this plant hardiness conversion zone. So there's the Royal Horticultural Society, there's the European zones. You can put in whatever zone makes sense to you. Because this course was developed through Oregon State University, some elements of the assignments, some elements of the template will be US centric, but as we build out more capacity, we have more and more information to share internationally and inclusion of that. If you've got a hardiness zone map indicated here, as well as what that hardiness zone is. If you have a weather station nearby, you can populate this. If you don't, you can't. I get that. It's just one of the ways to take some of that historic information and bring it into this area. So when we look for data, chances are it'll be a weather station. And so what we're trying to do is understand the distance and direction from the design site. So is it 25 miles northwest? Is it 4 kilometers southeast? We just basically want to get a sense of how close it is to understand how relevant that data is. Now, when we're starting with historical data, it's a starting point. It doesn't inform the entire design. It's like a map. The map isn't the territory. We have to go and walk the land and be with the land. There's this weird conversation that's going on right now in some of the regenerative land design folks that are saying contours are the language of a landscape. No, the land is the language of the landscape. Contours are just a thin slice of the land. They're a way for us to interpret the land. And even then, they have an accuracy and an error rating. So they're not exactly the language of the land. They are, let's say, a flavor or a melody of the land. They are a thin or a thick description of it. But there's just one element that helps us to wrap our brains around it. I've known a number of designers that have never worked with topographical maps. They walk a piece of land. They walk over the piece of land. They live in the land for a little bit. 3 of my major mentors, Brandon Bauer, Sepp Holzer, and Zach Weiss, who's also a colleague, as is Brandon, they walk land. Thanks for the topographic map. I can read it. That'll give me a bit of a sense, but everything is designed in situ to understand and work with. Some of us who work remotely before we come onto site, myself included, we do a lot of GIS analysis through either something like ArcGIS or QGIS, which is a free GIS software, or we hire GIS experts. I have a number of folks that I work with. One is Brent Smith from Paper Street Permaculture, who's fantastic. I'm currently just evaluating another GIS expert. And if it goes well, I'll share that information with everyone. So in terms of our closest weather station, what's the elevation of it? What's the location of it? What's the address of it? All those good things. Originally, we had another column in here, and you can put it in if you want. You basically just click and put in a column to the right or the left. And if you have data that's being built specifically for your site, and I highly recommend you do, I think it's incumbent upon all of us, if we live on these sites, to start building weather data, either through small scale weather stations or just to take metrics and markers with like max and min thermometers, which are thermometers that'll show you the max in one day and the min in one day that you can reset and then jot down. It's really important for us to start to get a sense and a rhythm of these different elements, these biotic and abiotic elements within the sites that we manage. Most of us have landscape amnesia. We really don't think that the outside exists. It's one of the reasons why the majority of the populace of the planet is deficient in vitamin D. We were evolved to be outside, and most times we are inside boxes and houses instead of being outside. So it's important to get out there. Where's the location? Is it urban, rural? Coordinates and address if you want to give that. Average frost-free period, average summer heat, record heat. And again, we're looking for the month and the date, average winter low, record low temp. Over here, we're looking for images of climatic conditions. So extreme climatic conditions, or if you're moderate, trying to start to get the information out. It's a really important piece. Every time you bring in an image, you need to put in the URL, not just the link. You have to put in the URL plus the access date. And the reason for that is the internet is constantly changing, and we're trying to source all our information and really provide authorship and make sure that we're citing what we're looking at. Predominant wind direction and seasonality. So mostly west in summer, mostly north in winter. Average speed, so kilometers per hour, miles per hour, whatever you work in is fine. This is an important piece that we found before, only because some people don't know that there's different types of measurements. So pick one measurement, metric or imperial, and stick to it throughout the entire course. If you've already grown up in imperial, I don't recommend this is the course you change to metric. It's a whole other system. It is very easy to use when you get into things like water harvesting, but don't switch just for this course if you don't have a history of using a unit of measurement. average annual rainfall, daily rainfall, average annual snowfall, last spring frost, first spring frost. And then if you do have this data, you can enter it in here, or you can just pop in the screenshot of a chart that you find on something like Wikipedia or WeatherBlue or any other of those different weather aggregated sites. Last but not least, it's nice to have a wind direction or relevant wind charts. There's some examples in the tutorials about how to find that, but normally we're taking a look at kite surfing, wind surfing, or airports. And then there's some meta sites that you can pull wind data from. And you can also just draw your own, right? You can, if you've lived on a site or the client has lived on the site, you can ask them, it's like mostly west, this time of year, mostly east, this time of year, and just draw it. Back to SWOT, and then into our question and answer again. It's the first week of assignments. I noticed that there's a question in the chat. What does GIS stand for? Great. It's Geographic Information Services. And so basically GIS is a way of taking spatial information that exists in the world and to digitize it into some kind of data set. So when we take a look at the information that's on our phones for our maps applications like Apple Maps or Google Maps, that information was originally pulled from the original GIS satellite constellation. And there's a number of other satellite constellations that are out there. The information that's in Google Earth in terms of the topographic information came from NASA's Shuttle Radar and Topographic Imaging, or Shuttle Radar Topographic Map, or Topographic Mission, SRTM. That happened in 2000. So when they ran the entire planet with LiDAR, which stands for Light Image Detection and radar, LiDAR basically was sending lasers down to the planet and was coming back up to the sensor on the shuttle in the year 2000, and was basically giving them a sense of the entire topography of the Earth. Now, the problem with that is that every pixel was 30 meters, which meant that if you had any elevation change that was sub 30 meters, so if you had an elevation change that was a foot or a meter or 10 meters or 25 meters, that meant that the computers had to interpolate, which is the scientific word for guessing, what that topographic information looks like. And this is one of the reasons why I do not rely on topographic information that's derived from the SRTM shuttle radar mission, which means any information that comes off of Google Earth, any information that comes off of Google SketchUp, which is the terrain model, and any one of the contour map generators you see online. I've had colleagues that have then hired me to come on site and do a survey with a drone, and it was called a RTK ground station, real-time kinetic ground station, because they purchased one of these maps from a contour map generator, and it ended up being so erroneous to be misleading. So one of these things we have to be careful of is where our information comes from. The problem with that data set is it can be upwards of 15 meters in error on the vertical axis and 5 meters in error on the X and Y axis, which is fine if you're working at, a section, 640 acres, if you're working at, even 50 acres for general planning. But once you get into the 5, the 10 acre, or you have a lot of elevation difference, that data can be very problematic. So I always note, and feel free to do this, where my topographic data comes from, because it's the best we have, or it's what's there. And I imagine in the next couple of years, especially with some of the satellite constellations that are going up, we'll have LiDAR down to the sub-meter or sub-10 centimeters or sub-centimeter over the years. That runs the topographic information conversation, and that ends week 1. Any questions about the 3 assignments in week 1, either the personal survey, the design site, or the climate survey? Questions, comments, queries, quotations, epiphanies? Okay, great. So we're going to mosey back on to, we did our next assignment review, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to show folks, generally folks get a sense about how to post, but I just wanted to show folks what the process looks like, just in case folks were a little confused. Great. So this is up. So just going to take and screen share and go back to Chrome. Okay, so once we're on to Chrome and we're going to post, we'll go to lesson 1. Maybe somebody's already done this for us and we don't have to think about it. So here we go. Here's my link to this week's assignment, section 1 through 3, week 1, did my best, proved during the course. Thanks so much, Jose. So this is exactly what we want. We want you to link here and we want you to link to your assignment. Little trick, when we click on this, it's going to take us to the assignment. And as you do this into the future, something that is a huge help to me and the rest of your classmates is please link to the exact slide that we are on. So as we take a look, as we go forward, what you'll do is say we want to link to this slide. Basically, you just copy and paste the URL, copy and paste that, and use that as the link that you put here. That'll take me directly to the slide and it saves me a ton of time. If I ever say, oh, by the way, you missed something and I'm just using marks to help guide you in the right direction, what I'm asking you to do is in my reply here, I'll put a reply like others have and just click the reply and then say, hey, Javan, I redid this. Just take a look at it and I'll take a look at it. And if you've done the work, I'll increase your grade. You should not let me know that in subsequent assignments that you've done something previously. Always go back to the original assignment and let me know. The way Canvas works is it's got all of these little dots. Those dots tell me if something hasn't been seen. And then as I go back, it shows me the number of things I haven't seen. And that gives me the ability to go back and know that I need to go and do something. So if you haven't done that, I'm not going to see it and I'm not going to be able to give you your feedback. A couple of things about feedback. If you're more than 2 or 3 weeks late, I will mark it, but I may not have time for feedback. So please be aware that it's important to get things in on time. If you ever get really far behind and you're just struggling, don't worry about it. Life happens. I've had every single piece of life happen to every student, any number of students on this. You can always re-enroll in the next offering or just do your best along. And if you don't get to the end, that's okay. The one thing I plead with you, don't wait till the end and give me 12 assignments all at once. It's a huge amount of work on my end. I really appreciate that you've done all that work, but it is a lot on my end. So please do try and keep up. And if you're just not doing it, that's okay. You're better off to take the time to do this work instead of rushing it at the end. Question. So we don't use the submission tab to submit our assignments. Submission tab. You know what? I've never seen a submission tab. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't see a submission tab here either, Naomi. So basically what we're doing is just hitting reply and then putting in our information. And it's to the right of the assignments. Dun, 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 dun. Submission rubric. So that's just talking about this, how to submit. And you can put it there as well. Basically, every single one of these will submit to the bottom. If you go down, you'll see that it's all the same. And this is really important. Submit all your assignments together. I want the whole week. I don't want one. When you're done with all your assignments, submit them all together. Please and thank you. Suzanne, many county assessors in the USA are developing GIS mapping divisions. Yeah, and some counties and some areas actually run LiDAR. So when I was living on Vancouver Island, the Capital Regional District ran LiDAR every couple of years and we had sub-meter contours, which is just a phenomenal asset to have. Cool, great questions. Anything else before I go into my final announcements in this massive diatribe that is our first office hours? Questions, comments, queries? Anything, everything? So we can submit as a PDF? You absolutely can. Yeah, if you're working not off Google Slides and you're working on a PowerPoint or Keynote or something else, yeah, that's my preferred way, is to create a PDF and then upload the PDF. Please don't link to whatever the online Microsoft Office file sharing thing is. It takes a lot of bandwidth and it is temperamental through Canvas for some reason. It should be a direct link. It should just be like downloading something from Dropbox, but for whatever reason, it's super problematic on the platform. So yeah, Suzanne, if you're creating on PowerPoint, just output as a PDF, save as a PDF, and then upload. That's great. And then I will send out a naming convention for sending PDFs shortly as a Q&A. So thanks. Any other questions?
I got a quick question. Sorry, there's some construction in the background, but I primarily have worked on an Apple in the past. With the company I was with, they always wanted Apple programs.
Sure.
So if I'm going to Canvas and I'm using this template that you've got there, can I work in that online and save it, and then that's like where it lives, or
Yeah.
do I need to download something?
Yeah, so the tutorials go through the whole thing, and I'm happy to go through it with you live here. So basically, when you get to the template, what you're going to do is you're going to go File, Make a Copy, Entire Presentation. And what that'll do is it'll make a copy of it for you. And then you work off that copy. You currently can't work on this copy. You have to make a copy of it, and then you can work through it. If Google Slides is new to you and you don't want to learn a program like this, you can download as a PPTX, and Keynote will open a PPTX, or you can open directly in PowerPoint. Formatting will be a bit off. You know, whenever you download things from different presentation softwares, it'll be a little off, but that can then give you the opportunity to work. If you are familiar with working with Apple operating systems and you want to work in Keynote, you can. It will be a little bit off, but you can work on this online. You can also work on this offline if you use Chrome browser and basically select this to be an offline file to use. I do that only because it's super useful as you're going throughout it, just to have access to it. And basically, if you're in an internet problematic zone, if you don't have the best continuous bandwidth, it'll basically update it locally to your machine. And then the moment it connects, it'll update to the cloud. Does that answer your question, Corey?
Yeah, great, thanks.
Okay, cool. Yeah, the tech always takes a little bit. And feel free to do blended assignments. If you want to draw your maps, take photos of them and scan them and then upload them, that's great. I still do hand drawings. I still use paper and pen. I do mostly tablet work now using an iPad Pro, only because it's so easy, and I don't have to hold a lot of transparency paper and vellum and all the other things I used to use. So it's just another tool, not something you have to buy for this course, not something I recommend you buy for this course, but if you have it, you have somebody who has one that you could borrow and play with. There's some great applications. Morpheo Trace is fantastic. Really like it as an application, and also really like Procreate. Those are the two that I use quite a bit. There are others that are more expensive and are more at a architectural or landscape architectural level. Morpholio Trace is at an architect level, but there's great tutorials about Morpholio. And if you're into following people who do great work, you can go down a rabbit hole on Instagram when you get to Morpholio Trace. Incredibly, a lot of Russians who are amazing at it. So it's a fun little sidebar there. Cool. Great. I'm going to quickly do a couple of announcements. So 2 weeks time, we'll have our next office hours. Next Monday is when your assignments are due at 9 a.m. Pacific time. I will usually take an hour or two before Monday to mark a few assignments. So if you do submit early, I do mark early just to keep my my assignment load down on Mondays, because there's a lot of you, so there's a lot of assignments. I go through the assignments that are due first, and then I move backwards. So if you're late for whatever reason, just know that I'll get to you. You're just not the first priority. I go through who's on time first, then I go back. So I'll look on Monday, I go back on Wednesday, and sometimes I'll check again on Thursday, Friday. Usually it's Thursday. So if I'm not marking on the weekend, it's because I'm enjoying my weekend. So don't get frustrated, don't get upset. I will come back to it when I come back. Any questions about submitting? Any questions about that? And if not, we'll just jump into the next couple of pieces here. Okay, a couple announcements. Tomorrow, there is a free webinar all about food security. Natalie Pepin is an incredible Indigenous off-grid farmer and homesteader. She ran one of the largest, if not the largest, community-supported agriculture farm in Alberta, Canada, a few years ago. She is a dear colleague and friend. And over the last couple of years, we've been offering food security courses because of her incredible background at Harvard and all the rest of it. She has this amazing process to walk people through where you put down how much food your family eats on average per meal and how many people there are in your family. And you get an entire tally of how much food your family eats, and then a whole process about how to walk through and develop your family's food security. There's a full program we're offering starting February, it goes through September, because we've been seeing so much food instability due to prices, shortages, quality, and now in terms of supply line disruption from pretty much every single angle. We have this big audacious goal for 2022 to engage 10,000 people in food security and to increase 1,000 individuals or families' food security directly. So part of that is we're offering a lot of webinars on this topic. And so tomorrow there's a free webinar at 11 a.m., January 11th. If you can't make it, definitely sign up for the webinar because there will be a replay that I will put out to folks later on. It'll be a conversation about Natalie's journey and my journey, the processes we walk through, and generally how to think about food security. So the link's there. The next course that's coming up is January 19th, 2022. This is called Low Tech Erosion Control. If the only thing you do is click on that and watch the videos, which are case studies from Neil Bertrando, who's also an instructor at OSU, and Jeffrey Adams, it's well worth it. These guys are using sticks and stones to save the world. I'm so enamored with the two of these guys. They're doing what's called low tech erosion control, which are shovel ready, inexpensive implementations using stones and sticks and other materials to slow, spread, and sink water in generally arid climates. They work in humid climates, but if you're in an arid or you have arid places or erosion on site, highly recommend you check out the landing page for those resources. So part of this is me just telling you about courses because they already have resources for you to take a look at. I ran an Envisioning the Next Year workshop, which is a 2-hour workshop. It's just about reviewing the past year and getting ready for the next. If you're one of those people that has a hard time transitioning out of the last year and going to the next one, great workshop. I've ran it for the last couple of years. It's super fun. And then a couple other pieces here. We just started this amazing course with Jude. It's already running. It's already full. If you're curious about the recording, that'll be available in March. Amazing permaculture chef Seth. He'll be doing a number of Eat Well courses over 2022 about reintroducing traditional cooking and taste first. And I'm so stoked to work with him because I've eaten at his table and it's always spectacular. So we'll be doing a number of courses over the year. Excuse me. And there's that family food security course coming up February 8th. 12 sessions. We're with everybody for 7 months. We walk through the entire process. Amazing coaching, amazing Q&A, a huge amount of assignments and worksheets and everything. It's just awesome. So if you're brand new to food, brand new to growing, great course. We're really building out the gardening section of that course, which is not something that we teach in this PDC, but Natalie and I have been at this for a while. And so we know how to make a lot of food in not a lot of time with not a lot of materials and with the least amount of sweat possible. I'm doing an amazing course with Zach Weiss, the protege of Sepp Holzer. If you don't know Sepp Holzer, highly recommend you look him up on YouTube. He's an Austrian permaculturalist whose original farm called the Kramatterhof was at 1,100 to 1,400 meters above sea level. On there, he has 72 ponds, he has thousands of fruit trees, and he was doing something that nobody could understand to the point to where they called in the local psychiatric hospital and they brought a paddy wagon onto the site to take him away in a straitjacket because he was doing things so different in Austria, which generally is a culture of you conform or we'll take you out. In the fall, I'm doing a number of water workshops with an incredible practitioner, Gord Baird. Gord Baird and his incredible wife, Anne Baird, designed and built the first 2-story cob load-bearing building that was engineered for seismic on Vancouver Island. eco-sense.ca is their website, and their work is just beyond incredible. Gord and Anne helped contribute to create the policy, which in British Columbia now allows you to have gray water and composting toilets, which has become the de facto for precedent setting for the rest of the world. So if you are in another area in the world and you're building a home or you're working with a homeowner and they want to challenge the building code for an exception and exclusion, that's a great code to go take a look at. So Gord's going to be doing a comprehensive course on composting toilets. He goes all through the automated composting toilets, bucket composting toilets, and how to think about what comes out of our bodies and how we can use it to its best efficacy. We'll be doing a gray water course. Gray water is all the water that comes out of your house that doesn't come from the toilets. So that's your sinks, your washing machines, all of that is gray water, and we can use it in the landscape. Great book about that, Art Ludwig, Creating a Gray Water Oasis. Fantastic book. We'll be doing a course about it in the fall of 2022 over into 2023. And then we'll be doing a rainwater harvesting course. Gord lives in a very arid part of the world, and he has done dozens, moving into the 30, 40, 50 range of working at large and small scale rainwater harvesting systems for potable use. He works with communities, he works with schools, he works with municipalities. Great guy to learn from. Other couple of courses that are coming up, working with living soils with Joe Tobias of Root Shoot. We did this course last year. It was phenomenal. Great way to get into the living soil at a very low price compared to what's out there. We'll be doing a cold climate forest gardens with Luke Rosewood, goat grazing vegetation management with Jeanette Hall. If you don't know Jeanette, go take a look at Bad Plant Management. She is a badass shepherdess who runs a herd of goats in Alberta doing plant management custom for municipalities. And then we've got a number of courses potentially coming up with Blake Cawthorn, organic beekeeping, organic nursery management, and organic berry production. Blake's a nurseryman out of Kentucky and has been doing phenomenal work out there, breeding pawpaws and all the rest of it. Just incredible work. I say this because we all manage finances and time over the next year. And I've had a lot of folks ask, well, let me know about all the courses that are coming up. So I wanted to take a moment and just let folks know that that's what's coming up if it's of interest to you. If you want to know more about those courses, you'll need to sign up to my email newsletter, which is at allpointsdesign.ca. Right at the bottom of the website, you'll get the pop-up for the newsletter. And basically, I let people know when new courses are coming up and what's going on. Whew. All right. We made it through the hour, folks. Huge office hour for number one. So great to see everybody. Hopefully you're feeling enthusiastic and excited about the course. What I can say is that folks who are really successful, they go through the tutorials, they go through the tips and tricks, and they're willing to fail. So I'll end on this. In firefighting training, at least in the US and in Canada, pretty much every trainer opens up with, we have two options. You can come with an open mindset or a fixed mindset. Open mindset is, hey, I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to learn what you have to say. Fixed mindset is, I already know this. I don't need to learn anything new. There's another mindset that I've encountered called a growth mindset. And a growth mindset says, not only am I open, but I'm open to failure. I'm open to trying something and being wrong. And realize from my side, the marks for me are just a way of guiding you to the answer. Be willing. I give you permission to fail and fail really well at this course, to submit assignment that just has all the wrong things on it in terms of what we're looking for, and to be really happy with that, because that's practice. We need a lot of mileage in this work. And so full permission to fail and fail spectacularly, but definitely take the time to go through the tutorials, definitely take the time to go through the materials, and you'll do really well. Ask lots of questions, bring them to my attention, bring them to your colleagues and your classmates. There's a lot of experience in this class as I take a look at the introduction page. And I'm looking forward to working with y'all. So thanks so much for coming today. If you have any aha moments or appreciations about this hour, feel free to put them in the chat or just unmute. And unless there's anything else, I'm going to sign off.
Thanks, Javan.
You're most welcome. Thanks so much, folks. Great to see everybody, and we'll see you in Canvas. Bye now.